The author of Unfreedom of the Press, the host of the #1 show right here on Fox, nationally syndicated radio host. I call him the great one, Mark Levin. Mark, a lot of things happening tonight. A lot of things will be happening tomorrow. Your thoughts, sir?
First of all, this is worse than 1876. I'm going to tell you why. From a constitutional perspective, and I really want to focus in on this because it's relatively simple, and the media are either ignoring it or distorting it. Only the state legislatures under our federal Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, can determine how electors are to be chosen. They even say directed. That is, set up the state election laws. What the Democrats did, the Biden campaign and their surrogates, is after the 2016 election and not that far before the 2020 election, they said, we've got to win these battleground states by hook or by crook. So what they did is they went into these states, all four of which have Republican legislatures. And they had to figure out how to get around those legislatures because of the Constitution. In a state like Pennsylvania, which has Democrat governor, Democrat secretary of state, Democrat majority elected justices on the state Supreme Court, they used all of these non-legislature officers to change the laws in Pennsylvania to assist the Democrats. And so the legislature was cut out. Similar things happened in these other battleground states that were targeted by the Democrats, their lawyers, and their surrogates. You see what happened in Georgia. They went after the signature requirements. They watered it down to the point where they really don't even work anymore. That's why you have almost no sour or poisoned signature ballots. You have a very weak Secretary of State, a very weak governor. The Secretary of State capitulated. He entered into a consent decree. He violated the Constitution. The Michigan Secretary of State issued 7 million ballots. The problem is under Michigan law, you have to request a ballot, and you need some identity requirements. In Wisconsin, similar things took place, even worse. In Milwaukee and Madison and other heavy Democrat parts of the state, they changed the state election laws too. That's 4 battleground states where the Democrats targeted. This is the book of Madison's notes. The notes, the most comprehensive notes taken during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. They specifically rejected the direct election of presidents and vice presidents. More importantly, they specifically rejected executives, that is governors and anybody in the executive branch choosing the president or the vice president of the United States. And they rejected the idea that the judiciary would be involved in the process. Yet in all 4 of those states, the executives and the judiciary had more impact and more input into the election laws leading up to this election than the state legislatures did. They were utterly cut out. So here we have a problem. We have a constitutional crisis that nobody wants to talk about. The 4 battleground states, you had unconstitutional elections if you follow the Constitution. Unconstitutional elections as a result of what the Democrats did, circumventing the state legislatures. And so what I hear now is, well, 60 suits were brought and 60 suits were lost, and the Supreme Court would, doesn't matter. This is what matters. This, Madison's notes, the Constitution, not precedent, none of it. What matters is the plain language in the Constitution. They picked the state legislatures because they decided that was the place that they wanted the elections determined, that they would decide what the election laws would be. So the Democrats circumvented every single one of these in those 4 states, as did the Republican leadership in Georgia. So now what do? So these electors have been certified. Who certified them? The very Democrat officials, and in the case of Georgia, the very incompetent Republican officials who changed the laws in the first place. So in Pennsylvania, the governor ultimately certifies the electors, sends it to the archivist in Washington, D.C., so he's certifying his own unconstitutional actions. Same thing happens in Michigan. Same thing happens in Wisconsin. And frankly, with incompetent Republican leadership in Georgia, same thing happens in Georgia. Now we get to the joint session of Congress, which is also provided for in the Constitution, and we have, other than Ted Cruz and his group and Hawley, we have gutless, feckless Republicans who are telling you, under the 12th Amendment, it says we shall count the votes. I have no choice. I have to count the votes. Really? You have to count the votes? Let me be utterly clear about this. The framers of the Constitution weren't stupid. The framers of the 12th Amendment weren't stupid. Do you think for a minute they would say that Congress should count votes that are unconstitutional? They assumed that the votes would be lawful. They assumed that the states would follow the legislative process that they put in the Constitution. I'll give you a perfect example. Not one of these Republicans would say if a state legislature passed, just as an extreme example, and said, no electors can be black. Do you think for a minute that these same Republican senators would say there's nothing I can do about it? We have to count them because that's what the 12th Amendment says. Of course not. So what we have here is, in fact, a constitutional crisis. We have Republicans running for the hills. They say we'll deal with this next election. Here's the problem. The laws will have been changed for the next election. And so we have still unconstitutional activity and baselines in these states.
I would have thought
I hear the music. I'm ready to dance.
I would have thought the law and the Constitution mattered in Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Apparently not, Mark, for many. Thank you. Mark Levin. Don't forget to show Life, Liberty, Levin Sunday nights here on Fox.